All right, ladies.
All right, I can start. Hello, I am Sid Regan, and I'm a freshman at Robbinsville High School.
Am I good to go?
Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
let me see if I can try to remember the list of things that you said to say. But I'm Eliza. I'm 17. I go to school in Neptune City at a school called the Academy of Allied Health and Science. Is that everything?
I think so.
Okay, perfect. That's enough.
I had a question about that though. Is
Sure.
that's not your local high school? Is that
Mm,
a high school that you had to apply to and
Yeah, it's a public school, but it's like a vocational school. So I applied to get in, but it's still considered like a public school because it's like a magnet. But my home high school would be Howell High.
okay. And do you know did you choose that because you already know what you think you might want to do?
I thought I did in middle school because I was like a child and still am and think I like know what I'm doing. But um, yeah, I thought I wanted to be a doctor before freshman year, and then I went through freshman year and realized, like at the medical high school, and realized that wasn't for me.
Listen, the earlier you figure that stuff out, the easier I think it might be. So that's good. That's really good. Hopefully you figure it out. You know, you figure out exactly what you want to do. Um, it's definitely a journey. There's things that I thought that I was going to do when I was younger that now I think about that now and I think, how could I have thought that? So, but it's good that you recognize it. It's really good that you recognize it.
Yeah.
So the way this is going to work, and I see, we're streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube. So if there happens to be any questions that come up through that, we can address those as well. I see we have Ashley Hastings here. So I just want to say hello to you. And feel free, if you have any questions, to send them through the chat, and we will address them. And I make sure I have that up. Talk about baptism by fire here. um, I'm going to pose a bunch of different questions for you. And, you guys can volley back and forth. And if there's ever anything that, maybe we missed, we can always go back to it, sort of free flowing. So, again, feel free to share whatever you're comfortable with. Okay. So the first question that I have for you guys is, who is it in your family that has been diagnosed with TS?
My brother has TS.
My brother also has TS.
Okay. Do either of you know where, because we talk about in our presentations how TS is genetic. Do you happen to know where in the bloodline maybe it came from? I know some people, they never know, and others have discovered over time what family member, or they've been able to trace it back to somebody.
I don't really think we ever figured that out. We found out that my grandpa had tics, but we don't know if it was Tourette syndrome. So yeah, not really.
Okay.
I have no idea. I have no even side explanation because I'm not sure where it comes from, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of people go through that. They don't really know where it comes from.
Is there a
Um,
way to find that out other than, kind of just seeing it in each generation?
you know what? I don't know. I mean, the genetics, of course, play an important role in that. And I don't know if the sites ancestry.com and finding out who you're, in your lineage.
Mhm.
But I don't know, honestly. I have met some people that their parent was diagnosed around the same time that the child was diagnosed. And the reason for that was they didn't know what it was when the parent was going through what they were going through. Um, they were never actually diagnosed with it. So, when the child came along and was experiencing similar things, then they could put a name to it. So, I'd imagine that there's a lot of people throughout the family history that had it and didn't know it. They didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So Yeah, but that's why the genetics, when we have families that are willing to donate their blood to the genetics lab, it's really important. Um, but yeah, so who knows? Maybe they'll find out, at a later point. But um, it is what it is now, and we roll with it, right? So what I want to ask, because I know a little bit about each of your brothers' journeys to diagnosis. Um, I would ask for, to whatever degree you're comfortable, for you to share a little bit about what that process was like for your sibling, and then what the process was like for you on sort of on the other side of it.
Well, okay, I can start. So, for my brother, I don't really know way too much about it other than what I've been told because I was so young. But I just remember, like, from my perspective, a lot of it was scary because, all of a sudden your brother is screeching and screaming and moving, and you don't know, is he okay? Is he. So, there's a lot of worry there. And also, as a young kid, sometimes they got more attention than us just because they needed it at some points. So, as a younger kid, that definitely was a challenge. But I just remember like late nights of mom and dad like trying to make sure he's okay, me worrying about him, and just not knowing too much about it.
Yeah, I was also pretty young. My brother, I think, was like 5 to 7 years old when he was diagnosed. So I was like 3 to 5, you know? So I also didn't have a great understanding of what was going on, but I kind of, from going from like doctor's appointments to therapists to like all over the place, it was super confusing for both my brother and I and like our whole family. And yeah, I agree, like the attention thing. I think we're both younger siblings. So,
Yeah.
you expect to be the one that's babied, but there's obviously somebody in the house that needs a little more attention. And like as a child, I resented that because, it's hard when you're a kid and you're like, oh, why does he get so much, attention?
Mhm.
But, now obviously being more mature and understanding like what's going on, you have to see that they needed more help. And it kind of helped me because I like learned to do a lot of stuff on my own.
That's a good point. And I would imagine that for a lot of people, it would be hard to say that they resented their sibling initially. But that's a really real and true feeling, especially for kids as young as you guys were, going through this. I think about my own kids, not really understanding necessarily in current times what's actually happening. They know what they have to do when we go to a store and that kind of thing, but it doesn't really compute. And it's evidenced by when they cry and say that they can't see their friends right now. And so at that young age, I'd imagine that you have to grow up kind of quickly. It's
Definitely.
if that's an accurate assessment
Yeah,
in both you guys and your siblings. Um, and
definitely.
you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from what I've learned about uh, kids with TS, they have to get to know themselves very quickly and very well, to know what works for them, what doesn't work for them, things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, Again, I keep saying this just because I want to make sure that you understand that to whatever degree you're comfortable answering questions. Um, but I would like you to share candidly, if you can, what it's like for you, when you are out in public and maybe your sibling is, like I think Sid, you said before, screeching, or
Mhm.
maybe they're making a movement, or something that's sort of out of the ordinary, if you will, um, and how you handled that maybe then, and then how maybe you have changed how you handle that now.
Back then, I definitely kind of like, we kind of just laughed it off and just smiled and kept talking like everything was okay. And I definitely think it was kind of different having people look at you being like, oh, is he okay? But for the biggest thing for me was we definitely just kept going with their lives. And by now, you get used to it after a while. And not as many people really look as you would think. So, yeah, it's a lot just getting comfortable with realizing, it's going to happen and a few people will look.
Yeah, when I was a kid would get super embarrassed. Another thing like that. I'm saying all this from like when I was a kid and I was like, not as educated. I had all these like thoughts like, oh, my brother's like so weird, because I didn't understand. So I'll be honest that I would like, be like, oh, who's this kid? He's not in my family. Um, but now it's a lot easier. I mean, it would be less of him ticking and more of like his OCD that would cause issues in public, getting like caught in a ritual of having my mom need to repeat something or somebody to do something. And, if that person would refuse, it would be like a big tantrum. And so that was like, you're in the family with like the kid that's screaming his head off. It's like, ooh. But now I'll either if he has an OCD ritual, help him. I'll say whatever he needs me to say. I'll do like what he needs me to do, or like, and he's also gotten like a lot better at controlling his tics and OCD in public since he's been a kid. So it's not as big of an issue anymore, or as big as a thing as it used to be. But when it does happen now, it's normal for me. If people want to stare, they'll stare. That's their prerogative.
Mm-hmm. Um, do you talk with your siblings about their TS and their tics? Or is it sort of an unspoken thing that, because you both are very, very supportive. So I'm curious to know if you guys have ever had sort of heart to heart conversations about it or anything like that.
Not really. Like, we talk about NJCTS and all of that, but we've never really had a sit down talk just talking about his TS. I don't know if that's just because, we don't do deep talks like that, or it's just, I don't know, something we don't really need to talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of the same way for me. Like we don't really have those kind of deep conversations with each other either. But when I don't know if this is like a relatable thing, but like if you're fighting with someone and then they say something to you that kind of like makes you realize like, oh, like that's what this person's going through, and like maybe I should have realized that a little bit more. Like if we're ever having like an argument or something, or like this would probably be like an argument we would have like a bunch of years ago, and he would say something like, oh, like I really can't control this, or like something like that, like arguing with my dad if he's stuck in an OCD ritual. When he says something like that, that's the only real like kind of like deep statement I get to hear from Ethan about his Tourette would be just like something like exclaiming something like that, like I really just can't help it. That makes you kind of realize like, oh, this kid's really going through something, and like, I got to take it a little bit easier on him.
I love the way you put that.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and I think that, um, again, I said before that I feel like uh, kids and just people in general with TS have to learn about themselves really quickly, and understand themselves to know what's going to work for them, what doesn't work for them. But um, for their siblings and their family members, they also have to know them, and what might set them off and what might be more difficult for them. Um, and I don't know if it's a sibling thing, but Eliza, like you just said, he might say something and you go, okay, he might be really going through something right now. So let me change gears and approach things in a different way, or whatever it happens to be. But I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as a sibling, your senses are a little bit more heightened and you're more aware of, and I keep saying your sibling, Sam and Ethan. I'm saying sibling for those that are out there that are listening. But you're more aware of them and the kinds of things that could set them off, or things that could be more difficult for them, I'd imagine.
I feel, yeah, that probably goes for a lot of families with people who have TS, because for my brother, one of his triggers is hearing his name, which is probably the worst trigger that there could be because it's the most commonly used word that people use around him.
Mhm.
But that's one of the things that you become like hyper aware to, is just like hearing his name sometimes will just make me like kind of cringe, because I'm like, oh God, like what's he gonna do when he hears his name? But like like
Like
hearing his name will become something that is kind of like a trigger for yours, or like whatever that is, you know, it becomes like a trigger for you too, because you're like looking around to see what's going to happen next.
that's like Sam when he had the trigger with just the word fire. You either know it's coming up in a song or like hear someone say it and just hope he doesn't hear it. And you're right. You just cringe away like, oh, what's he gonna do?
That's a really good point. It's almost like you're, you know, how it's has been described to me, as like an itch that you need to scratch, that when the tick is coming on. But I imagine that it's similar for you guys when you hear those trigger word, what you know for your brothers that is a trigger for them, it's for you as well. And the response is different. You're thinking, how are they going to handle this? What's going to happen? Um, so that kind of leads me to the next question. Um, we talked a little bit about, you know, when you're out in public and they have either a tick, or Eliza, like you were saying, if he's doing a ritual for, you know, something like that. How do you guys cope? Because you talk a lot about, um, you know, the person with TS and how they cope and what do they do to help themselves. Um, but as a family member and as a sibling, you go through different things, with your sibling. So what kinds of things do you guys do, to help you get through things like when, and I know you mentioned this was when you were a little bit younger, but when your sibling is getting a lot more attention than you might normally, or your parents are spending more time with them than they are with you, or when you're out someplace and um, the tick that they're having or whatever is going on is causing maybe a commotion or something like that.
For me, the biggest thing was definitely always have one or two friends you trust and you can relate to. So like in those moments when your parents can't really spend time with you because they're helping your sibling, it's kind of nice to be able to like go to your friend and be like, "Hey, you want to talk?" Because though it's not a sibling, it's always nice to have someone to talk to when you're kind of feeling down, like you don't have any attention, or because just in the moment, in the end, oh yeah, they need extra attention, but sometimes, you need to take care of yourself and go find a friend. So personally, I found a friend and, they're going through a similar situation, and it's kind of nice to just connect and, have the same problems.
I would say that I'm trying to think of a way to cope like in the moment. I mean, when I was younger, and even sometimes now, um, like having Ethan try to get you to participate in like an OCD ritual is like probably extremely frustrating for him, obviously, but it can also be frustrating for the person that it's directed at. So if my brother wants me to say something over and over and over again until it sounds right, like that's, you know, can be frustrating for me, even though I understand like what's going on in his head and why he would be, you know, asking me to do it over and over again. I still would be like, "Ugh, I just don't feel like saying the word, you know, what's up over and over and over again." Um, but and when he was hospitalized, it was always like, don't give in to his rituals, don't do this, because you know he needs to learn what it's like when people don't give in to what he wants. And so I usually will give into like his OCD ritual if he's asking me to do something now, just to like make things easier. And I guess that's what I would say for like how I cope, is I just, you know, will try to move it along as fast as possible, make things easy for him, make things easy for me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't really have necessarily anything that I do in the moment that to like de-stress the situation other than just kind of make it go away.
Yeah, I'd imagine that that's that can be very, very difficult. Is that, I know you guys said that you don't really have those heart to hearts. Sometimes it's just an understood thing. Has there ever been a time afterwards that you have talked to your sibling about it? Like you said, I may not want to say that word over and over again until it sounds right. Have you ever, once that period of time is over, have you ever talked to them about it?
Not
Not
really.
really.
I'm sorry,
Like
go ahead,
I
Sydney.
no, it's fine. Sometimes when he goes through his really bad periods where it's like what we call tick storms, I'll kind of ask if he's okay, but I don't know, we just never really talk about it after.
My brother will sometimes like apologize to me after like a bad like fit or something, and then I feel like extra bad because I'm like, you don't have to, like, it's not your fault. And like in the moment I'll be upset, and then I'll feel sad for being upset at him, and then sad that he's apologizing to me for something that he can't help. And that would be like, we don't still really have those heart to hearts, but that's something that just really opens my eyes to being like, wow, I really should not have, handled it this way or that way. I should just, accept that he can't help these things and it's hard for him.
But what a hard position to be in sometimes, you know. And I'm thinking about that when I'm imagining him apologizing, either one of them apologizing to you, and then the feeling that you might have when they're doing that, being like, it wasn't like they did it on purpose, or but I feel like that's important to recognize, because that's another level of this. It's not just about um navigating through the tick storms or the OCD rituals, but it's the aftermath and the feelings that you have for your sibling. You love them, and to see them go through a tough time. So I'd imagine that the warring feelings, you might be upset at a certain point, but then feel bad at another point. I'd imagine that that's a lot on your shoulders as well, to navigate through. Um, but I already know both your siblings are incredibly lucky that they have you guys. And it's evidenced by the fact that you're willing to come in and share these pretty personal and kind of raw emotions and feelings and things like that with the TS community. So I keep saying thank you, but I really do mean that. And I know that your siblings, they may not say it, but I would imagine that they're incredibly grateful for what you guys do for them. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. Um, Both of you are pretty strong advocates, and I would like you to share, what is it that I was going to say force, that's the wrong word. What is it that motivated you to want to get out there and advocate? And then the second part of that question, what kind of advocating do you enjoy the most?
So I think when I was a lot younger, I would see Sam go on and do like these cool presentations, as I would see, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then as I grew older, I kind of realized like he was public speaking and spreading awareness for a cause. So I was like, I kind of want to be part of that, being able to talk to people about something that happens in our world that's not the most has most attention. And something I like advocating the most, it's pretty much anything I'm passionate about. I really like, as we're doing here, advocating as a sibling, because there's a lot more advocacy these days for TS, and I feel like there's not as much for siblings. So I really want to be someone that can go and talk as a sibling.
That's a that's a great point. And when you think about different organizations, they have sort of different facets for the person that's going through the condition, but also for family members that are helping that person through it. So I think that's a really, really good point. And I feel like we need to do more of that.
So I would say that um, I got involved. Well, so the NJCTS has been a part of my life for a lot of years because they provided my family with a lot of support when my brother was diagnosed. But as I got older, my brother became a youth advocate, and I was like, that's pretty cool. Plus, I already have a pretty big mouth, so like I have a lot to say, and a lot of big opinions. So I was like, I think this would be a good place for me to practice like public speaking, teaching people, advocating, especially because it's something that I'm already passionate about. Um, so that's mostly why I became a youth advocate. And it's so personal to me. But I really like advocating for the NJCTS, but I also am a huge fan of what the ACLU does, American Civil Liberties Union. So, anything that they really advocate for is stuff that I'm passionate about advocating for as well.
I'm glad you said that. Are there any other organizations that you do advocacy for?
Not officially. I was part of a summer program with the ACLU because I was super interested in what they were doing. And that I got like a little bit of practice, but it wasn't really anything specific.
Yeah, same here. I do like little fun things at school, smaller things I'm passionate about, but I haven't really done much at other places.
Do you happen to know how your sibling feels about you advocating for them?
Okay,
Again, those heart to hearts you may not have, so you may not know, but I'm just curious.
being completely honest, I don't really know how he feels now, but I know when he first started, he was kind of like, "No, this is my thing. Don't come." But then as I kind of let him know that I'm going to do it from a sibling perspective and not, especially when we were younger, I think he kind of didn't wanted people to know I don't have TS. And as we grew older, I kind of told him like, "No, I'm going to do this from a sibling's perspective and I'll leave all of the TS point of view to you guys."
Yeah, my brother loves to be the star of the show. He's a little
Yep.
superstar like that. And so when I joined, it was like, what are you doing here? This is kind of my thing. And I felt bad at first too. Like I felt really like awkward at the training because I was like, well, I'm like the only one here who doesn't have Tourette, like am I appropriating this? But I don't know. I feel like it's something that I have a lot of fun doing. It's something I'm really interested in. It's something I'm allowed to do, even though I don't have Tourette. Um, yeah, so I think that he's kind of sees that it's something that I really enjoy. So now I don't think he really has an issue with it.
I think that's a good point. I mean, with the journeys that they're on, when they find something that they feel good about and comfortable with, I'd imagine you want to own it. You want that for you. But I also see that, when and I would say this for whatever it is, whatever condition or um, whatever it is that a person has, they have family, and it affects the family in different ways. I remember my father when I was in college. It was my senior year of college, and I found out after I graduated that he had thyroid cancer. And he was going into surgery to have his thyroid removed pretty soon after graduation. And I got really, really angry because my parents had known for a long time and they didn't want to ruin my senior year of college. So they waited to tell me until, that was all done. And I was angry because I really wanted to be there for my dad. And I certainly would have come home more often, and I guess maybe done more things with him had I known that. But I guess that was the exact reason why they didn't they didn't want to tell me. So my point being is that it affects family members in a very significant way. And I think it's important, especially for something like this. I think it's important to put it out there. Um, you know, we talk about, not necessarily wanting to have a heart to heart with your sibling. And I don't really have that with mine either. But there are just some things that are understood. Um, and I think that by you guys doing what you're doing, you're showing them, you don't have to say that you love them, just by your actions, you're doing that. And they may tell you that, I want this to be my thing, and that's true, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't appreciate you guys doing what you're doing for them. So, you know, I I'm grateful again that you guys are willing to do that. Um, is there anything that I haven't asked that you think would be appropriate for a sibling to hear? Any advice that you would give them?
I kind of feel like just realize that you're still siblings, and though they may have TS, like at the same time, you're going to have usual sibling fights. You're going to disagree over sibling things, but you're also going to have good moments too. So even though you probably will have your usual fighting moments, just like any other sibling, you're also going to have good moments too.
Yeah, I would just say probably to be kind and be patient, because I am not always those two things, and it is not great because, like I said, my brother can't help it when he ticks or when he has OCD rituals. So it's really hard in the moment to remind yourself, like, why am I doing this to, like, the person that I love? Like, why am I, getting frustrated and whatnot? But um, looking back, it's like, how could I let myself, be mean to him for something that he can't control? So yeah, just try to stay calm, be patient, be kind. It's always helpful information no matter what.
I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said when you look back at it. Um, I think self-reflection for everybody, whether you have TS, you don't, it's self-reflection is a really important tool. Because I can't, there's countless times where I think about how I reacted to maybe something that my kids did. And I think about it later and I think, man, I should have reacted differently to that. And I try to change that for the next time around, because there's always another time. But I think that's a really important point to make, is that you're human, and that, yeah, you do react in the ways that you react. But when you reflect on it and it feels like maybe that wasn't the best way to handle that, then you work towards handling it a different way the next time around. And I'm sure your siblings appreciate that as well. And evidenced by, when they come back and they apologize for whatever it was that happened. So you're both thinking about it. And I think maybe it's a sibling thing, but it's understood. You don't necessarily have to say it. But it's understood. Um, what is, I might have asked this before, but what do you prefer to do in terms of advocacy? Do you prefer to do things like presentations, or things like wellness fairs where you're maybe sitting at a table and you're speaking? Or have you given a presentation to your own classes in your schools with this?
I really enjoy anything, especially because Sam's done a lot of different things I've kind of got to experience too. So it's definitely cool going out to see like a bigger group of people and presenting to them. But it's also cool like having your own table and it being like part of a bigger thing, but just your little table, and you get to share things like that. And also with a smaller group like a classroom, you kind of get to talk to each individual person instead of just one big wide group. So for me, all of it is kind of my favorite.
I like,
Excuse
I
me.
think that something like this or like a small group of people is really cool. I also think that because it's nice to be able to have people, you know, to listen to and to listen to you kind of have this dialogue where it's like more like it's more honest, it's more personal than like, you know, going to a classroom talking to like 30 students about, you know, some stuff kind of about your life and then mostly about Tourette. Like this to me, I don't know, I like better just because it does feel so personal. Um, but yeah, I really will go anywhere. Like the grand rounds at the hospital was really cool. So I liked that.
You know, and I'm glad you said that because I feel like, you know, we're starting to incorporate youth advocates in our in services in schools as well. And I always feel like adults listen to kids way more than they listen to other adults, and kids listen to other kids way more than they listen to adults. And I don't think young people realize the power of their voices and hearing them talk. So when you go into a grand rounds in a hospital and you've got all these doctors in there, and they're really hanging on your words. It's impressive in and of itself, just for a teenager to be up there standing and speaking. But
That's the other thing is I get to feel like super cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
but being so candid too, which is it's important for people to hear those things, and not just siblings and families, but doctors and clinicians and all of those people that are on your team to kind of help you through. It's important for them to hear your perspective as well. So, but yeah, listen, I, I enjoy going to those things. I find them eye opening. I enjoy listening to the questions that get answered. If they do ask questions, I wish that was something that I wish more people would do, is ask questions.
Yeah,
Um,
a lot of people have questions and then they're like, yeah, no, I don't want to waste time and I don't want to ask.
yeah. And that I feel like, at least in the youth advocate presentations, you see, um, you know, the kids, especially the younger kids, when one or two started off, then it kind of picks up speed, and you have other kids that feel a little more comfortable asking those things. I remember when I was a kid, and then when I was teaching, they did this. It was a program called Kids on the Block, and it was puppeteers that would come in, and each of the puppets had a different disability. So one had Down syndrome, one was in a wheelchair, one was blind, and they would address all the kinds of things that you wanted to ask but didn't really feel comfortable asking. And it was eye opening. It was really great. So I think that's an important point. The candidness and the honesty that you hear, because I'd imagine, you know how, like, when you're in class and you have a question and you ask it, as a teacher, I knew that if one person was asking that question, there were 5 other kids that had that same question. So I would imagine this is similar, that the feelings that you guys have, everybody out there, that they're not saying anything, they also have those feelings. So even if they don't ask a question, they know that there's somebody else kind of experiencing the same thing, which in and of itself, I think is important to know. Um, pardon me. I left my water in the other room and I refused to unlock my door because I already heard knocking at one point and I didn't address it. And so I'm gonna address. I saw Eric. Hi. I saw you come in. I wanted to acknowledge that you were here. Eric, do you if you want to put it in the chat, that's fine. Or if you want to share it, do you have any questions?
No, I'm just here to listen in, and I'm really liking what's being said so far. I'm Eliza's boyfriend, so she asked me
I
to come
told
in.
him to attend. I
Yeah, and
saw his face and I was like,
Smart.
I was so surprised when I saw his name in the Zoom because I thought he was just gonna watch on Facebook Live, and I was like, he's here.
yeah, I just wanted to show some support, and I really like what she's doing with the NJCTS. I think it's really cool.
Oh,
Like
well, isn't
really
that
good.
sweet?
I know how supportive.
Like we said, it takes a village, right? It's all the people that surround us that support us in what we're doing that helps motivate us and keeps us going, right? So Eric, thank you for being here. I do appreciate you coming in and supporting Eliza. She's wonderful. We love having her part of NJCTS. So
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
sure. So for Eliza and Sid, is there anything else you would like to share with whoever's out there that's listening? And hopefully people will backtrack and view us in a video later on. But is there anything you'd like to share before we close things out?
I'll go ahead if Sydney wants to keep thinking on that. I just wanted to say, I don't know how many people are listening. I don't know if anyone's listening, but if anyone is, I would probably just say to not judge other people based on, how they look or how they're acting, just because I remember what it was like to be that kid whose brother was, screaming, doing this, like dropping to the floor onto his knees, like stuff that you'd just be like, what? I just would hope that people are less judgmental about something like that happening in public. Don't be like, oh, who's that weird kid? Maybe just be a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah, I think pretty much same thing, but be less judgmental on everyone too, no matter how they act, how they move, whatever they do, because you never know what someone's going through, and it's always just better to support people instead of going on and attacking them for something that they probably can't control.
Both very, very good statements. And Sid, I like that you pointed out not just TS, but anybody. And you're right. You don't know what battles people are fighting behind the scenes. I had someone tell me a couple years ago, if you stood in the circle with a group of people and everybody put their problems in the middle of the circle, you'd probably want to take yours back. And I think about that. I do. I think about that often, especially in our current circumstances. So I like that you pointed that out, and it's a really good thing to remember that TS or other, there are battles people are fighting, and to just be kind and compassionate.
Yeah,
And
I have a friend. I said that because I have a friend who their sibling has autism, and I didn't even realize it was the same. And it's not exactly the same, but the struggles are very close. And you always us advocating for people for siblings who have TS is we can also advocate for everyone who's going through those struggles.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, ladies, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you being here. And I'll call on you again. um, but give each of your brothers a hug from me, and let them know that we're thinking of them, and that they're really lucky to have sisters like you two. I hope that what we shared here today will help others. And I'd like to do it again. So like I said, I'm going to call on you. But I really do appreciate your taking the time, and the advice that you've given to everybody and what you've shared, I think is really, really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been nice to listen in.
Thank you, Eric. All right, so I think that about wraps it up. If anybody that's listening If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Lisa Aguilera. I don't even think I mentioned that when I first started. I'm the Youth Development Coordinator at NJCTS. You can go to our website and send an email. I do hope you reach out. Any questions, you need support, you need resources, we have it for you. Okay. Eliza and Sid, I'll be in touch with you. Okay. And if there's nothing else, I think we'll sign off.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Kelly.